Hey everybody, it's Chris with Killer Arcade Games. Today I thought we'd tackle the subject of Arcade1Up versus real arcade hardware or real arcade cabinets, the pros and cons between each of them, which one I ultimately think is better, and I think you might be surprised with the outcome of this video, but we can also debate this in the comments, which will be fun. Okay, let's start with the pros for Arcade1Up. The pros would be that they're very easy to obtain. You can just go to Walmart, pick them up. You can order them direct from their website, Arcade1Up.com. You can pre-order them if you know they're coming out and you want to make sure you get one. They're readily available in almost all cases, and in some cases you can actually pick them up pretty cheaply. The second pro I would say would be it's newer hardware, it's less likely to break down, at least in the near future. So you know buying it, you're probably going to be okay for a little while. So as long as it's not dead out of the box, you should be okay. I mean, these do come broken out of the box sometimes, but for the most part, they seem to run just like any normal piece of electronics. They're probably going to last you a while without any failures right away. The other good news about the hardware is if something does happen to break on it, you can probably find a replacement part. If your monitor goes out, you can get a new one in most cases. You can just replace it in general and use a bigger 20-inch monitor. There's more flexibility when it comes to replacement parts on these cabinets. The only thing you can't really replace easily would be the PCB. Now, if you're under warranty, I think Arcade1Up is pretty good about replacing the PCB. If you're not under warranty, you may not be able to find that board replacement, but we'll talk about that in the cons department. If your controls fail or something goes wrong with the buttons, you can usually replace those parts on Amazon, eBay. You can get parts almost anywhere for that stuff. So that is another pro. Readily available parts is actually a big deal when it comes to dealing with arcade stuff nowadays. Another pro would be you still get the real arcade feel, just without the giant size and all that stuff that comes with it. Now, you're never going to get that CRT look on these cabinets in most cases without doing some heavy modifications to your cabinet. Lately, Arcade1Up has been doing simulated scan lines, which is a huge plus. It helps make an LCD look a little bit more like a CRT. Nothing's ever going to replace that CRT look, but overall, when you're playing these cabinets, you kind of get the real feel. It's not the real thing, but you get the feeling that you're playing an arcade cabinet versus just sitting on your couch with a joystick in your lap and trying to play on your TV. This gives you more of a feeling like, hey, I'm playing an arcade cabinet, which is cool. The very last pro that I can come up with for the Arcade1Up department would be the size and weight of these cabinets. I'm in an upstairs room, a spare bedroom in my house. I have a doorway here that is not a standard 30 inches because it's not a main doorway, I guess. This is a newer home, and I realized later that they put a small doorway in here, so I couldn't physically fit a real arcade through the door frame. Where it's situated, I can't even expand the door frame. There's nothing I can do. The banister's right there. So it's a huge plus that I have 5 of these Arcade1Up cabinets. You can see 4 behind me. I've got my Carnival light gun cabinet here. And all 5 of these cabinets were carried upstairs easily by 2 people. My wife and I just carried it upstairs, no problem. If I was in a pinch, these are all modded. They're a little bit heavier than stock cabinets, but even then, if I was in a pinch, I could bear hug the thing and carry it down the stairs. It's not that big of a deal. I find that to be a massive pro because I just can't fit real arcade games in this room. I can get them into my house, but the idea of getting them up the stairs, turning the corner, and getting them into this room just seems like a nightmare to me, and it's something I'm just not interested in doing. Now let's move on to the cons section of Arcade1Up. The first one that comes to mind is the controls that come with these Arcade1Up cabinets are just kind of universally junk. The only one I've ever found to be a decent set of stock controls is surprisingly the Star Wars Arcade1Up cabinet. I have not modified mine. It's a modified cabinet, but the controls are actually the exact same stock controls. They've seen heavy usage, and they're still holding up. I mean, they feel kind of cheap. They don't feel like, of course, that big metal control yoke that you used to play with on the real Star Wars cabinet, but they feel good enough, and they haven't broken on me. It's not squeaking or having any of the problems other people have had. Maybe I'm lucky, but that's the only cabinet that I think has quality controls that didn't really need to be replaced. But the Arcade1Up stock stuff is just garbage in my opinion. I can't handle the controls one bit. Some of you guys can, and that's fine. I'm not knocking that. If that's what you like and you're okay with it, good for you. You don't have to spend any extra money, but I can't stand them. As I mentioned before, all my cabinets are modded cabinets. They've all been upgraded with HAP controls, HAP buttons, HAP joysticks. They're so much better that way, but that is an added cost, so keep that in mind. And on to our next con, which would be, speaking of mods, these things can get really, really expensive once you start putting money into them. So for example, all the cabinets in this room, all of my Arcade1Ups currently, since they're all modded with PCs, higher end controls, new art kits, new marquees that light up, those are all probably valued at near the price, if not more in most cases actually, than what it would cost to go out and buy the real thing. That's not the case with Killer Instinct, because Killer Instinct's a crazy expensive arcade cabinet, but an MK2, I mean, I'm almost near the price of what you could pay to get a used MK2 at this point. My NFL Blitz cabinet down here, same thing. I spent a lot of money on that cabinet because so much had to be done to it to get it up to that point, to where I could probably easily go on Facebook Marketplace right now, find a working arcade Blitz cabinet. It's not going to have all 3 games, but I can find one for way less than I probably paid to build that cabinet. Moving on to the third con for Arcade1Up cabinets, if something critical fails on the cabinet, a stock Arcade1Up cabinet, like say the PCB that runs the game, that is going to be a huge problem for you if you're outside of the warranty period, because anytime you go to their website, it shows they have replacement parts. All the PCBs are always sold out. I've never been on there one time and seen PCBs available. So then you have to go to the Arcade1Up groups on Facebook, or go to Facebook Marketplace or eBay and look for something that matches your cabinet. You want to get another Killer Instinct PCB, theoretically, they're not out yet, but if you want to get another Killer Instinct PCB, you're going to have to hope you can find one, hope somebody has it still in good condition and is willing to send it to you, and of course you're going to pay them for it. Now, the only other thing you can do is just mod them with a PC, but then you're getting into con number 2, which is you're going to pay a lot more money to do that. It's going to start getting pricier. You're going to have to put a PC in, and depending on the game. I go with PC because it's way more powerful than a Raspberry Pi, and you have no limitations. But if you could put a Pi in, you'll get away cheaper. If you put a PC in, you're going to start spending a decent amount of money. So that's a huge problem, I think. You can generally replace all the other parts on an Arcade1Up pretty easily, but their stock PCBs are very hard to replace in most cases. Now on to our next con. This is a phrase that I kind of just made up thinking about this one day. These don't necessarily pass the kid test, in my opinion. You may be asking yourself, what is the kid test? It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go ahead and explain it just in case. I personally don't have any kids, probably never will. Our friends' kids, however, who are about, I think now they're 9 and 11, but you know, I don't know that I would invite them into my house to play my Arcade1Ups. You may be asking why. What are you, a Scrooge? Well, no, that's not really the case. It's just the fact that, you know, these cabinets rock around pretty easily. The front panel, the kick panel, I don't even want to call it a kick panel because I know that my friend's kid's young boy would really put a test to that name. Oh, it's a kick panel? Let me kick the crap out of it. And he may go right through this cheap piece of wood. I don't even know what you call the kick plate on these things, but they're nowhere near 3/4 inch wood pieces that come on real arcade cabinets. The cabinet itself is only 1/2 an inch thick, which I don't think he's going to break that, but personally I don't want to even find out. I could picture coming in this room while he's in here and he's swinging off the joysticks and the cabinet's about to tip over. I don't know that I would feel comfortable just saying, yeah, come on in here and play all you want, and not keep an eye on them. Or any kids for that matter. Just in case they see this, I'm not just trashing your kids, by the way. It's just kids in general are rough with things. I know a lot of you probably have kids and you're probably like, oh, come on, they're just fine. I would not feel that comfortable letting a bunch of kids have at my cabinets and see what happens in the long run. On to the final con for Arcade1Ups. These are not very well built for multiplayer experiences. Most of the people who buy these are adults for the most part. They're the ones who are interested in this stuff. I've never actually played 2 players on many of these cabinets. My wife and I have played on a few of them together, and I can tell you it gets cramped really quickly. The idea of playing with 2 guys trying to play Killer Instinct against each other, that's going to get really, really tight and uncomfortable, and you're not probably going to have the best experience. Well, there you have it. That's the Arcade1Up pros and cons. I'm going to actually go down into the garage where my arcades are banished to live currently because I can't get them in the house, up the stairs, all that stuff. So we'll go down there and we'll talk about the pros and cons of real arcade ownership, and then I'll give you guys my final thoughts on this subject. Okay, so here I am in the garage with my first 2 real arcade purchases. I'm actually really proud of these. These are my 2 favorite racing games of all time, and I finally got both of them at home in the garage. I don't love that they're in the garage, but it's kind of a necessary evil. I even always said I'd never buy a real arcade just because I didn't want them to be in the garage. I am in South Central Texas, and although I'm wearing a hoodie right now, it's normally probably too hot to really get out here and enjoy arcade games at least 6 months out of the year. Really more like 8, but you can at least kind of squeak out a good day here and there where the temperature's not so insane and the humidity's not so insane, where I could come in here and play these at least a couple extra months out of the year. But right now it is January and we finally got some real cold weather, and I'm actually having to wear a hoodie in here, but still I'd rather be cold than hot in here playing these. And one of the reasons is the heat buildup inside these old machines. I don't want to stress the old hardware any more than needed. So the first obvious pro to real arcade ownership is you have the real thing. I personally believe that's what we're all chasing with Arcade1Ups. It's like you're just constantly trying to make it as close to the real feel as possible, or at least that's how I personally do my mods. I don't do anything weird and flashy. I don't put light up buttons. I want it to look like the real thing, feel like the real thing. So I feel like I'm just chasing the dragon, if you can say that. I'm constantly like, can we get this thing closer to feeling like a real arcade cabinet? And eventually you hit a wall where you're just not going to get it any closer, which I personally think I've hit with my Arcade1Ups. I think they're as close to the real thing as possible. Investing any more money in them is just kind of insane. So I think the next step, the next logical step, which is one I already took, is just buy the real thing. Especially when it comes to these sit-down racers. You really aren't going to replicate this with Arcade1Up. Sure, they have the Outrun cabinet. It's, from what I've seen, I haven't played it, it's nowhere near this. This is the real deal, the real feel. The steering wheel has feedback. The subwoofer is in the seat. It's a real seat for one. You know, it actually has a back to it. I think this is the best way to go as far as racing games go. Just get the real thing and get it over with. Or just build yourself a really awesome MAME racing cabinet where you have a sit-down cockpit that you made yourself. I think Arcade1Up's a long way off from even coming close to replicating the feeling of these two machines. So the other pro, and actually one of the cons I kind of forgot to bring up about Arcade1Up, is you're going to probably find these machines cheaper than just stock Arcade1Up cabinets at this point. Newer Arcade1Up cabinets are just getting so crazy expensive that they're getting to the point where I'm not really interested anymore. They did release an official Killer Instinct, and at $700, I'm just not interested. It's too much money. I'd much rather put $700 towards putting a real Killer Instinct in the spot I've reserved next to Rush here, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna buy their Arcade1Up version when I kind of already have one upstairs. Sure, it has online play. That's the biggest draw by far for me. Other than that, I want the real thing over buying another Arcade1Up personally. And the funny thing about the price is both of these cabinets combined cost me $800. That is $100 more than the current Killer Instinct Arcade1Up cabinet. If you really sit and think about that, I mean, of course, right away you think, wow, that's nuts. But if you really sit and think about it, that is complete insanity when you consider the amount of materials that went into making these two machines over that Killer Instinct Arcade1Up. Sure, it's a newer machine. Sure, times have changed. Now these machines were probably way, way more than that when they first released. I'm willing to bet they were thousands of dollars a piece, but time has gone on. They had, you know, various issues with them when I picked them up. A little elbow grease and a little can-do attitude got me up and running. Both of these machines, I think parts and all, I've probably spent a total between the two around $950 to get them both running, and I have the real arcade experience at home. So the price is definitely way better when it comes to certain real arcade cabinets. Certain classics like Killer Instinct, you're not gonna get for any cheaper than what Arcade1Up is selling for it, unless it's in really bad shape or you find a seller who's completely insane. The third and final pro, which, yeah, I really can't come up with any more pros because I think the pros are so obvious that it's just not necessary to dig anything else up, is these definitely pass the kid test. When my friends' kids came over, and this is in the garage, you know, at that time I only had the Hydro Thunder, they saw the cabinet, I said, hey, you guys wanna play it? I had no problems with them going to town on it. They can jerk the throttle all the way around, they can have all the fun they want, they're not gonna break it. Sure, if they tried really, really hard, they could probably break something, but at that point they'd just be being flat out malicious, and they're not gonna do that. They wanna play the game, they're not trying to beat it up. But these will definitely pass the kid test. They'll probably even pass the drunk uncle test. He comes over a little tipsy, may spill something on him. I can't tell you how much spilled stuff I found inside of Hydro Thunder alone. These things are built to last. They're not gonna fall apart from letting some kids beat them up for half an hour. I'd be willing to say I'd let an entire classroom of kids line up and play these for an hour. I bet I wouldn't find a thing wrong with them after that. But please don't bring your kids over here. I don't want them playing my games. I didn't have kids for a reason, people. Come on. So now we got to move on to the cons from real arcade ownership. And at first you may think, what could be so bad about owning some real arcade cabinets? Well, let me tell you one of them right away. When you go to buy these things, you're going to find one major con. They are extremely heavy and not easy to move. I got lucky. Both of these machines are on wheels, They easily roll. Actually, I could probably, yeah, I'm moving this one just with no effort practically. In fact, it moves so much that once all the repairs are done to it, I need to lower the feet so it doesn't go sliding across the room when you sit down in it. But you really kind of need either a truck or a trailer or both. Ideally both, because lifting these things into a truck is not nearly as fun as getting them onto a trailer, especially if you have a trailer with a ramp like I do. I'm lucky enough to have both a truck and trailer. It makes it a lot easier when it comes to these, especially you wheel them right up. In fact, this one, if you saw my recent video, this one was picked up by a crane and set on my trailer, which was awesome. Made it so much easier. And then when we got it home, my wife and I just kind of pushed it off down the ramp and into the garage, but it still wasn't terribly easy. These things are very, very heavy. I think each of these is around 400 pounds. That seems to be the general weight of a Midway style cabinet. So keep that in mind. If you go buy these cabinets, you're gonna be shocked by how hard they are to move around. Another con would be they often need work. When I bought this Rush the Rock cabinet, the monitor wasn't working at all. It was totally dead. I knew it worked in general, the game worked because I could hear it playing blind, as they say. The controls I could feel working. I heard everything running, I just knew the monitor wasn't on. So that's a common issue with these. The monitors get really old, they get worn out, or they just need work in general. That's kind of best case scenario if you ask me. I mean, I'm not a professional arcade repair guy by any means, but best case scenario is you got a bad monitor. Worst case with that, and you can't fix it, you just pull it out of there and you can put a TV inside of them, but ideally you want to keep that CRT, of course. So even after the work was done by my friend, The Wicked Arcade on YouTube, he worked on this cabinet and it still needs a little more work. Like it's constant. In fact, when I came out here, I turned on both machines with the flip of one switch because I have a power strip, and all of a sudden my Hydro Thunder monitor was totally out. I don't know what happened. I was like, great, here comes another problem. I could hear the game was running. The monitor was black. So what I did was just turn it off, turn it back on, and somehow that fixed it. In fact, it came out better than before. This stuff doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe because it's so cold in here that something wasn't really warmed up yet, and who knows, maybe I just got unlucky and now I'm lucky and now it works a lot better. I don't know, but I'm not gonna complain about it as long as it's working. Speaking of repairs, another con would be replacement parts for these are hard to find. You thought they were hard to find with Arcade1Up as far as the PCBs go. You can usually find replacement boards for these games. The problem is you're gonna be paying hundreds of dollars for them, and in some cases they may not be working. If you have a Killer Instinct arcade cabinet right now and the board goes out on it, the PCB goes out, it's unplayable, you don't know how to fix it, you can kind of get lucky because you could probably sell the broken board on eBay for around $700, but if you want to buy a new guaranteed working board on eBay, you're probably going to pay anywhere from $1,200 to $1,600. That's totally nuts. It's like buying an entirely new game. The worst part is you don't even know if that new board is actually going to hold up. It's still the same age as yours, may have been refurbished, but something could go wrong with it in the future. The same thing goes for some of the controls. Inside my Hydro Thunder and this cabinet, there's not just the game PCB. There is a PCB that controls the steering wheel motor. There's also a PCB in the Hydro Thunder cabinet that just converts all of the controls that are on the cabinet to something the PC that game runs on can read. So there's a number of things that can go wrong with these. You may not find the parts quickly. You may have to try to be forced to fix them yourselves, which can be difficult. And in some cases, they're just not repairable and you've got to find another part. So that is kind of a tough thing. Say you buy this cabinet, you're so excited about it, it could die the next day and you may literally not be able to do anything about it other than hope you find a part to replace it with. So in closing, I'd like to say that if you have the space for the real cabinets and you have a real love for certain games, it's better to just get the real thing if you can do it. For me, it's always been that way. I just didn't believe I could truly have the real cabinets, so I got deep into Arcade1Up cabinets, and I don't regret any of the ones I've bought and modded. I love all of them. I have no plans to get rid of my Arcade1Up cabinets, but it's amazing to have the real thing. It feels good. It's a weird excitement I have. When I sit down to play these, I think I never would have thought that I actually would have owned one of these. It seemed completely out of the realm of reality when I was a kid, and I'm starting to make it really happen. And some of that is because of you guys, by the way. You watching my videos gave me a nice little arcade fund that I can keep cash in a different account that I make from ad money on videos, and I can just go out and buy games. Like when this popped up, $400, I didn't have to think twice, didn't have to get any wife approval. Either way, my wife's really cool, she wouldn't have cared, but I just said, I'm gonna take my cash that I've made from YouTube, I'm gonna go buy this thing, and I'm gonna make some videos with it. So it's really nice to be able to do things like that. Thank you guys so much for watching my videos and supporting the channel. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I would like to make an analogy what it's like with owning an Arcade1Up versus a real arcade cabinet. The real arcade cabinets remind me of like classic cars. I've always thought they were amazing, never thought you might own one. When you got the chance to own one, you were thrilled, you wanted to fix it up, you wanted to make it as nice as possible, restore it to what it was. And sometimes things don't always work out with them, so for that very reason, you're probably not gonna be just turning these on when you're not paying attention to them. You wanna try to keep them running as long as possible. You're not gonna make it your daily driver, essentially, is what I'm saying. So I look at the Arcade1Ups kind of like a Toyota Camry. It's a sensible vehicle, it'll probably last you a long time. You don't really have to care too much about it. If it takes a crap, you can take it to the dealer, to a mechanic, they'll get it fixed right up for you. Whereas with a classic car, if you took it out and drove it every single day, it just doesn't make sense. You're putting miles on a machine that just doesn't need it at that point. It's got enough miles on it, you want to make it last as long as possible. Sit down and enjoy it every now and then. With Arcade1Up, flip it on. I personally don't care at all if mine died. I've actually had PCs that I've put inside two of my Arcade1Up cabinets that were much older. They just died, I didn't fret about it, no big deal. Pulled them out of there, put a new PC in, got them up and running within maybe, a day's worth of tinkering, no big deal. If one of these did that, if a PCB failed, that would be pretty devastating to me. All right, so I guess that's all I have for this video. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. I know this one's probably a little bit longer than I had initially planned, but leave me comments down below. We can debate this topic. I wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts on it. Maybe you think Arcade1Up is the future, the way to go, and you don't even want to look back at these machines, and you just want to play their representation on a smaller cabinet, and you're perfectly fine with that. Which I understand because I was perfectly fine with it myself, but when the opportunity came up, I bought these because why not? I've got the room now, I've made the room, I've made it happen. Or maybe you hate Arcade1Up cabinets, think there's no place in the world for them, and you only want the real arcades. Let me know in the comments too. I mean, I may debate with you a little, maybe other users can get in and we can have a fun conversation about this whole thing. Let me know if I missed anything also. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.